Hello and welcome to our ARC podcast on EAM Maturity Models. My name is Ed O'Brien. I'm a research director at ARC Advisory Group. Joining me is Paula Hollywood with ARC as well. My area of focus is EAM and FSM, analytics and ERP, and like all of us, other areas as well. Paula, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking about, we had, as part of our recent ARC forum, we had an EAM session that we polled participants on the maturity model and essentially where they think they are in the maturity on different dimensions. And I'll share the dimensions in a moment. But we had about maybe 36 people respond, and we thought it'd be helpful to just share kind of where people think they are in maturity in these different dimensions. And these dimensions include to begin with, whether or not they think their organization, and these are all anonymous, is the best possible in the dimensions that I'll mention. Proficient, whether they're using whether technology or products. Limited, exploring, or not applicable or none. So these are some of the comparison levels that they were looking at. And as far as the dimensions, we're going to be talking about technology, the people culture, reliability, process management, and asset information. So, as a backgrounder, these are the metrics that the participants were looking at. And to begin with, we're going to look at technology. And it's interesting with the technology, only about 3% of respondents say the technology is the best possible. We've been talking for years about the improvements going from CMMS to EAM and APM as well. And I think that these teams are doing very well, but from being self-critical, realizing that there's room to grow. Less than 1 in 5 respondents feel that the technology is proficient or better. That's interesting as well. So they're really being honest as far as where they think the technology can take them. A little over a third are using the technology, with about 3 in 10 answering the technology is limited, or limiting them, or limited. And about 15% are in the process of exploring this technology in their organizations. So in many ways, the thoughts are, I know many of us have been around for a long time and have been talking about where we ought to be. I think the reality is that there's it takes time to become proficient. It takes time to really nail the objective and what we're trying to do, and that's one of the things that we're seeing is a lot of from this perspective, a lot of the respondents are in the middle of the where they think they ought to be. Paula, how does this compare with your understanding in different markets that you've seen?
Well, I think that looking at the distribution of these answers was quite telling, because it nearly is a bell curve. If you look at the outliers, you have 18% on each end. To me, the good news here is that leaves only 18% are not really leveraging technology, with 15% exploring, at least 3%. It only leaves 3% doing virtually nothing. And on the other end, there's only 18% that think they're doing well. I think sometimes with these really small, informal kind of surveys, they can be quite telling, because they actually turn out to be quite accurate when you compare to a full-blown multi-hundred response survey. So, it'd be interesting to see how that would stack up.
That's so true. On the next dimension, people culture, and this to me was somewhat surprising, but not shocking, that we all have a long way to go within our organizations as far as people culture. And no respondents felt that the organization and the culture is the best possible. And everyone has different priorities, and in many ways working with operations may have different not only priorities but also plans for getting things done every day. And of course, there's always something changing the priorities every day. And only 3% of respondents feel that the people and culture are considered proficient. So there's a long way to go, and I think it's a good, it's probably true in every area. But we sometimes talk about teamwork, and we do talk about teamwork, of course. But the idea is when you've got such tight deadlines and everything, you've got competing priorities and things from that perspective. Paul, have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I definitely see that happening all the time. I mean, we have that in our jobs as well. What I think is remarkable here is that I think that the response to this question tells me that the respondents to this survey were truthful. Transformation is disruptive within an organization, and when you come right down to it these days, I think people are really starting to understand that technology is the easy part. It's the people and the culture is the most difficult. It's that human side of transformation, because let's face it, change management is hard. It needs to be built into a transformation strategy. Leaders must lead and motivate everyone else to get people to adopt new technologies and tech and processes and all that goes along with it. So I definitely see this as the major hurdle that we need to master to get where we want to go.
No, that's so true. And interesting, when we look at if you kind of look at this from a 20,000-foot level, about 97% said that their people culture is work in progress. So clearly there's an acknowledgement and a frankness, as you mentioned, of where we all could work better together, and also where organizations can help, not necessarily putting OT and IT and EAM and asset management kind of not at odds with each other, but sometimes the priorities are so different that there becomes potential for a little bit, whether it's friction or challenge moving forward.
Collaborate, and because that's the only way that this is going to succeed. I think cross-functional teams are the best way to approach it, but everyone has their own preferences.
So true. On a reliability dimension, and this area, I'm going to quote the stats in a few moments, but I know, Paula, you've been focusing on reliability for quite a while, and be able to put some commentary on here. But I think first off, I'd love to get your thoughts on what we see from what you've seen in APM and other areas as well.
Well, what I've seen in my experience is that reliability is a term that has been co-opted, shall we say, for many different uses. But the accepted definition is that the probability of a component, an asset, or a system will perform as it's required when used and understand under the stated operating conditions. So this financial benefit to being reliable is substantial. I think that the thing to understand is that it's not just maintenance. Reliability is just not the domain of maintenance. It's everybody within their organization. I think that reliability technology can predict failures, but there are other tools in the reliability toolbox of commercially available solutions to actually reduce the cost of failures, because that's what we really want to know so that we can design these failures out of the process if we possibly can. And I also think that reliability in the real APM world is a specific procedure based on Nolan and Heap research that you have to actually answer 7 questions. It's an arduous process, and it really comes down to RCM, reliability-centered maintenance. However, people just think, oh, well, I'm reliable, so therefore I must be doing RCM by extension, when that's really not true. And I think the confusion in the market between real reliability-centered maintenance and saying we're reliable is very different. So to me, as a purist in this space, when you're talking about reliability, I think in terms of reliability-centered maintenance, that specific practice. And I'm afraid not everyone feels that way. And I believe that there's a danger in the market because of that. People misunderstanding what it actually is.
In fact, in some of the research in EAM, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing in APM, more recently, it seems like everyone likes the buzzwords, whether it's analytics, whether it's APM, and that, oh yes, we embody that because we're more reliable than we used to be, but it's very different, the discipline. And in some ways, maybe the need to understand exactly as what you're saying is important to really make sure that they meet both the spirit and letter of what RCM is about.
That term you used was a good one.
Thanks. The interesting, I was surprised, you may not be, but only 6% of respondents say that the organization's reliability capabilities are best possible. I guess I'm not surprised about that, but less than 1 in 5 say the asset reliability results were proficient or better. In many ways, I guess, with all the discussions we've had over the years and all the discussions the customers have said, that it might be further along. And I think it may be exactly to your point, Paula, that some people may be more reliable, but whether they truly are meeting the letter and the spirit is a question beyond that. But also almost a third are using reliability programs, with about a quarter saying that their results are limited. So they're kind of, I guess I will say, dipping the toe in the water, but I think there's still a lot of depth that's needed to be able to take it to the next level. And to your point, Paul, it seems that maybe some don't know what the next step is, I would imagine.
Yeah. My experience with a lot of the commercial solutions is that they take a modular approach with different modules for different functions, so that you only have to purchase what it is that you intend to use. Now, in some cases, it's more broad-based, but I'm finding that even though it may be installed in a facility, it doesn't mean it's actually being leveraged. So, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in that regard. But I don't. The point of reliability is that it should be reviewed, and the reliability strategy should be reviewed at least on an annual basis. You can't look at it and say, well, I already did this once and walk away from it and think it's going to be good forever, because it just doesn't work that way. People change, work processes have a habit of changing. We need to ensure that all of these things are standardized and documented, so that make sure that we're not skipping steps and making the most of what we have available to us.
That's a good point. One of the things that I'll, again, whether you'd love to get surprised that about a fifth of the respondents are just exploring. They're still kind of at the railroad station of what we think that maybe others would have explored before. So there's a ways to go, and it depends on probably the complexity and the size of the organization. But I think many of us think that everyone's doing everything every day, and the reality is it's not always the case.
Yeah, as I think we are reminded in our world all the time, that from where we sit, we think everybody's doing all of this stuff and they're doing well at it. But you go out there and talk to people, and you go to events and start listening to them, and they're not. So I'm kind of not surprised that 20% or more are still exploring. I'm sure that there are some out there that think that they will never need this, but they could well be the ones that are out of business at some point in the not too distant future.
That's true. And I really think your point earlier that this is probably not only a truthful group, but my sense is, coming to the forum, many are very experienced. So a survey like this with a relatively inexperienced group, or groups that are changing roles, may think they're further along. They don't necessarily know what they don't know. And I think I think this room, I believe, had about 120 people in it, and many were very experienced. So it's very interesting, and they also seem to be self-aware. And I think that's, like you mentioned, kind of the value of these, because some of the more braver people, even though they knew it wasn't going to be identified what their organization was, are just, they're trying to learn from each other, and they're trying to share information with each other. And so, it's like, okay, I guess so maybe it's not like Lake Wobegon. Not everyone is always above average.
No, I agree. I have found that too. I think folks are going to events because they want to learn more. They want to know what their peers are doing and how they stack up, and are more willing to engage in those types of discussions than maybe they have in the past. I mean, they're still holding on to their secret sauce, mind you, but, if it will help them get ahead, I think they're willing to share a bit more than maybe they have been in the past.
So true. So from my next perspective is process management. And similarly, we're seeing, again, like you mentioned earlier, Paul, on bell curve profile in this example, but I think we all think everyone's already got the process down pat. It's been, we've especially in EAM, we've been doing between CMMS and EAM over the last probably at least 3 decades and probably more. But in reality, the process is still in process, and only about 6% of respondents say that they're at the best possible state, and slightly more than a quarter think that the process management capabilities are proficient or better. So similarly, there's work to go, and there's a self-awareness of, not the process being more than just workflow rules and just an idea of, whether or not you're going to be doing corrective or preventive maintenance in the case of EAM, but also on being able to identify what type of workflow rules, job plans, etc. But the process itself is a work in progress, and now with intelligent asset management working its way through all the different EAM systems and other systems, we take it to another level and probably slip back a couple of steps. I think, at least from my observation. I don't know if you've seen what your thoughts and people you've spoken with, Paula.
Anytime you introduce a new technology or a new procedure, you have to give people time to get used to it, get used to using it. And another question to ask before you implement technology is that have you trained everyone on the technology? Besides, go watch a video and it'll be self-explanatory. Well, that's not always true, and people learn different ways. So I think you have to take the time to make sure that the people that are using the tools are comfortable with the tools. I think that aligning the processes with the strategic goals might be a little easier said than done sometimes, but definitely a must. We need to determine how repeatable and how predictable we are at these things, because that's what we're really concerned about here in process management. Are they repeatable and are they predictable?
That's a good point. And I think this this slide and this topic reinforces, not like you mentioned, it's not just about tech. It's about the touch and tech, and about process and people. I mean, it's all of these are interrelated. And in order to be successful, you have to include all of them. It's not just a question that all of a sudden AI will automatically identify what it has to be done. It's a little bit of, AI, ML, analytics. It's very much a lot of the process understanding, and in many ways, at least in the observations that I've had, and I'm sure you have as well, conversations with customers and suppliers, that the whole idea of the retiring workforce, a lot of the knowledge is in the heads of some of the subject matter experts, and the process and the systems have to be able to collect that and communicate that, even more so than in the past, because a lot of these people are going to be off on the beach somewhere in the not too distant future if they're not already there now, I think.
We have to get people all on the same page, moving in the right direction. We have to identify ineffective business models or work procedures and change those if necessary. What we're really looking for is a foundation of consistency in project management or process management, either one. I think that definitely aligning our strategic goals with these processes is critical.
And our last topic for today is, I'm maybe not shocked, but I am a bit surprised on asset information, because we've been talking about, systems are very robust, and they are, and there's been a lot going on in asset information, but none of the poll respondents thought they're at the best possible state, and only 6% feel that they're proficient or better. So, as I say, we all, we've been preaching this and we've been listening, and again, these are very experienced people in this session, and they're probably much more self-aware than others. But it's just interesting that we do have a long way to go from what this tells us.
Yeah, I have to say that in this short little survey, I find this outcome the most alarming, quite frankly. We've already been it's been proven that we can't improve without data. And here we are finding that we're not really doing that great with leveraging our data. We need to treat it as the valuable asset that it is. Collecting it without leveraging it is a wasted effort. This brings me back actually to an example in one of the last year's forum presentations. A particular client shared the fact that he had experienced losses and shutdowns due to the inability to correctly identify the asset of record due to duplication. And so they have decided that that can't happen again, and to focus their operational excellence and digital transformation strategies using asset data as the base. So they have made a conscious effort to clean up their data and use it in more ways than what they have been. So hats off to that particular customer for doing that, because I think it's extremely important. As a matter of fact, I think it's so important I keep using this example all the time.
No, exactly. It's critical, and you bring up a very good point. And this share, and I'm sure you've seen this as well. And some of our recent studies, EAM and analytics come to mind. But we take for granted that that once you get a system going, it's up and running. And the idea of deduping, data management, one of the things we're seeing is that you need to have processes to clean data, cleanse data, dedupe data, maybe every year or two. So the whole idea is that it's not one and done during the pilot phase, and maybe the alpha or even the beta stage. But the data management is critical. So the idea of IT and OT working together being extremely important. And also the idea of what we're hearing is in some cases, where some customers are looking to look at cloud deployment options, and so they may be looking at upgrading systems that maybe they haven't upgraded for a while. But the idea of having real-time information, real-time information as opposed to historic data, one would think would help a lot to be able to identify things before the issues before there's failures, issues before there's out of compliance conditions and outside of upper and lower control limits. Things we talked about for a long time, but a lot of times the integration wasn't there in connectivity. So personally, I'm a little bit naive, but I'm quite optimistic that there'll be an improvement over the next, if we do these surveys over the next few years, as new systems come on board and there's more native interoperability and not just point-to-point integration, that there's at least the potential to have real-time information on real-time conditions. And then you can do something before the failure as opposed to saying afterwards, we should have found this last week.
If you've been in the business a long time, you know that integration is one of the largest challenges, or the biggest challenge, that manufacturers have to struggle with. And I do agree with you, Ed, that it's getting easier, but it still is a major issue, and I don't see that as going away as the value of data and the need for it in more places becomes more and more important. It's just not going away.
True. Well, thank you very much, Paula. I really appreciate your time, and we appreciate your knowledge, and look forward to these series of podcasts that we'll be doing on all sorts of topical topics. And have a good day, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Ed.